Talk to me. Which one of you is in better condition? Who?
Yeah. Well, I think so, George. Well, it's Thomas in tip-top.
Today, we're diving into the story of 6 wrestlers who absolutely hated the Fabulous Kangaroos. And trust me, this one's a wild ride. So, let's jump right in and uncover all the drama. 1. Tonino Rocca and Miguel Perez. Antonino Rocca and Miguel Perez were the ultimate challenge for the Fabulous Kangaroos. From the moment they stepped into the ring, the tension was electric. Rocca and Perez were adored by fans for their high-flying moves, their speed, and their ability to make every match feel exciting. They were everything the crowd wanted in heroes, while the Kangaroos were everything fans loved to hate. Loud, arrogant, and clever with their tricks, they knew how to get under people's skin and make every match feel personal. Their rivalry in the Northeast was more than just wrestling. It became a full-blown event that captured the attention of everyone in the region. Fans would pack arenas to see these teams clash, cheering for Rocca and Perez, while simultaneously boiling with anger at the Kangaroos. Every match was intense, every moment charged with emotion, and sometimes that energy got out of control. Fans would react so strongly that riots broke out, forcing security to step in and trying to contain the chaos. That kind of reaction was real, raw, and it made the rivalry unforgettable. Backstage, the tension was just as real. The Kangaroos loved the challenge of facing opponents who were skilled, respected, and able to connect with fans like Rocca and Perez. They knew that making them look foolish or stealing moments in the match would make the crowd hate them even more. And that was exactly the kind of heat they thrived on. Rocca and Perez were technically brilliant and smart in the ring, which meant that every match became a battle of wits and skill as much as power and strategy. For Rocca and Perez, every match was a test of endurance and patience. They had to maintain their composure while dealing with the Kangaroos' constant provocation and cunning moves. The tension between the two teams created moments that fans would never forget. Wins and losses mattered, but more than that, it was the story in the ring that kept audiences glued to every second. 2. Dory Funk Sr. and Ricky Starr. In Amarillo, Texas, Dory Funk Sr. was more than just a wrestler. He was a living legend, a man whose name carried weight in every corner of the territory. Fans respected him, wrestlers feared him, and promoters listened when he spoke. When the Fabulous Kangaroos rolled into town, chaos followed. Jimmy and Al were already notorious for pushing every boundary in the ring. They were brash, loud, and willing to get dirty to make a match memorable. For Funk Sr., that meant trouble. He didn't just see them as opponents. He saw them as a challenge to the order he had built in Amarillo, a disruption to the way wrestling should be done. Ricky Starr, his frequent partner, shared that same sense of purpose. While Starr didn't have the legacy of Funk Sr., he had fire, skill, and the kind of determination that made him the perfect foil for the Kangaroos. Together, they were more than just a tag team. They were defenders of the territory's reputation. Every match against the Kangaroos was intense, full of tension that the fans could feel. These weren't polite competitions. Blood was often spilled. Chairs were swung. Every maneuver felt charged with emotion, as if both teams were fighting for something bigger than themselves. The rivalry wasn't just in front of the crowd. Backstage, the tension was almost tangible. Funk Sr. was a promoter and a patriarch in Amarillo. He had influence, and he didn't shy away from using it to protect his wrestlers and his audience. The Kangaroos were outsiders who thrived on disrespect, and their presence rubbed Funk the wrong way. Every time they tried to outsmart or humiliate his team, it was personal. The heat went beyond kayfabe. There were arguments, sharp words, and real grudges being formed. For Funk Sr. and Starr, every match was a battle on 2 fronts. They had to fight the Kangaroos' clever tricks in the ring and maintain their own authority outside it. The fans could sense this intensity, which made the matches feel alive, unpredictable, and unforgettable. Each confrontation reinforced the Kangaroos' reputation as the ultimate heels and Funk Sr.'s legacy as the tough, no-nonsense hero who would not be pushed around. 3. Died 63 Jonathan and Roy McClarty. You want to talk about real heat in wrestling? Let me tell you about Don Leo Jonathan and Roy McClarty and the nightmare that was the Fabulous Kangaroos. Back in Vancouver, in NWA All-Star Wrestling, these two were the kind of guys everyone respected. Don Leo Jonathan was a powerhouse, the kind of wrestler who could make you feel every punch without actually hurting you too much. Roy McClarty was quick, smart, and had a connection with the crowd that could light up the arena. They were Canadian heroes, clean, disciplined, and beloved by fans. Now imagine walking into a match with the Kangaroos. Jimmy and Al didn't care about finesse or subtlety. They were masters at bending the rules, teasing the crowd, and making you look like the bad guy, no matter what you did. And if you were Don Leo Jonathan or Roy McClarty, it wasn't just part of the show. Sometimes it felt like the Kangaroos were testing limits, going a little too far, working you harder than you expected. You knew they were brilliant performers, but you also knew that every time you stepped in the ring with them, it could get personal. The storylines were heated, sure, but the resentment behind the curtain, that was real. Don Leo and Roy were professionals, but even they would admit there were times when it felt like the Kangaroos were pushing them, making them take bumps that weren't exactly safe, trying to steal every moment. Fans loved it, but for the wrestlers, it could be exhausting. It wasn't that Don Leo and Roy didn't appreciate a good storyline. They did. But the Kangaroos' constant rule-breaking and over-the-top antics sometimes crossed the line. Every match became a battle of patience and pride. You had to be on your toes, anticipate every cheap trick, every distraction, every bit of chaos. And the crowd was always eating it up, cheering for Jonathan and McClarty and booing the Kangaroos, which only made the rivalry feel even more intense. Backstage, the tension lingered. People whispered about how the Kangaroos had a way of making even the most seasoned wrestlers feel frustrated or work too hard. Looking back, it was a feud that defined both teams. The Kangaroos solidified themselves as the ultimate heels, and Jonathan and McClarty became the wronged heroes that the fans could rally behind. 4. Buddy Rogers. Buddy Rogers was the ultimate star of his era. The Nature Boy wasn't just a wrestler, he was a phenomenon. He held the WWF World Championship, drew massive crowds, and had a reputation for being the man everyone in the business either admired or feared. But when the Fabulous Kangaroos were around, Buddy's patience wore thin. The Kangaroos weren't just another tag team. They were loud, brash, and constantly pushing the envelope. They were the top heels, and their antics in the ring and in front of the fans often felt like a direct challenge to Buddy's position as the company's biggest star. What really got under Buddy's skin was the way the Kangaroos operated. They weren't just good wrestlers. They were smart, manipulative, and had a manager, Wild Red Barry, who knew exactly how to stir the pot. Barry made sure the Kangaroos got attention, whether it was from promoters, fans, or even other wrestlers. From Buddy's perspective, it often felt like the Kangaroos were trying to steal his spotlight, making themselves look bigger and more important than they really were. For a man used to commanding respect and drawing the biggest crowds, that kind of interference was infuriating. Backstage, the tension was real. Buddy didn't appreciate being challenged for attention or influence. He had built his career on charisma, skill, and star power. And here were two outsiders disrupting everything he had worked for. Every time the Kangaroos were in a tag team match, he saw them taking opportunities, bending rules, and provoking fans, all while making the crowd forget that he was the reigning champion. To Buddy, it felt unfair and disrespectful. He believed the ring should be about skill and presence, not manipulative antics and over-the-top gimmicks. The rivalry wasn't just about ego, it was about authority and recognition. Buddy hated that he had to share or even compete for the fans' attention with a team that thrived on chaos. The Kangaroos represented everything he despised about heels who didn't just wrestle, but tried to dominate in every sense, inside the ring, in the locker room, and even in the minds of the fans. It wasn't personal at first, but the more the Kangaroos flaunted their clever tricks and backstage maneuvering, the more real the resentment became. 5. Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette has never been one to hold back his opinions, and his feelings toward the Fabulous Kangaroos are no exception. While he admires the concept of the team and the influence they had on tag team wrestling, Cornette has been very vocal about why he personally disliked the performers behind the gimmick. For him, the Kangaroos represented a style of wrestling that relied too heavily on theatrics, rule-breaking, and cheap tricks rather than skillful storytelling or solid fundamentals. Cornette has always valued in-ring psychology, precision, and the ability to make every move count. To him, the Kangaroos often fell short in that department. Part of the disdain comes from the way the team was booked. Cornette has criticized how some of their matches were handled, feeling that promoters leaned on the Kangaroos' gimmick too much and allowed them to get away with sloppy work simply because they were entertaining villains. He has repeatedly pointed out that behind the masks and the clever entrances, the performers sometimes lacked technical consistency, and he couldn't respect a team that prioritized showmanship over wrestling craft. For Cornette, this was frustrating because he believes wrestling is a craft that demands precision and respect for the art, and the Kangaroos' style, brilliant as it was for fan reaction, sometimes undermined that principle. Another source of Cornette's dislike is rooted in his passion for historical accuracy and standards. He has often argued that wrestlers like the Kangaroos set a precedent where gimmicks and flash could overshadow real ability, and that annoys him deeply. Cornette is a man who admires hard work, professionalism, and in-ring discipline, and he sees the Kangaroos as performers who were clever manipulators of crowd reaction, but not always deserving of the praise they received. He respects their legacy as innovators, but resents the way the performers themselves relied too heavily on shortcuts and theatrics. And that's a wrap for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.